you very much for checking out our podcast here, whether you're on youtube.com/@GotMitchOnline, or if you're listening to the audio. My name is Mitch, and I got my producer, Danny. Danny, you got the Twitch going too, right? What's the Twitch deal?
Correct. I do a veterans Twitch. We do a lot of community work. It's twitch.tv/VOP Gaming. So it stands for Veteran Observation Post. So we do a lot of veteran work over there.
Awesome. So thank you for checking us out on Twitch. We are so honored. I am so excited. The excitement level is at an all-time high because, ladies and gentlemen, welcome to the show, the former TNA World Champion, the former Ring of Honor World Champion, former WWE Superstar. You can call him Austin Starr, Dan Sexton, Austin Aries. I call him Daniel. Daniel, welcome to the show, sir.
What's going on, Mitch? How are you?
Great, man. Just really, like I said, happy, blessed to have you on the show here. There's so much to talk about, but I just wanted to briefly, again, talk about, this is going to be about you, right? This is about Austin Aries. I got to ask you about the Dan Sexton name, though. I did some Wikipedia, and I saw Dan Sexton. Was that like your first gimmick
No idea
name?
what you're talking about. Everyone tried to say that Dan Casual Sexton and Austin Aries were the same guy, but it wasn't the case. It wasn't the case. That's just a dirty rumor. But they were a great tag team back in the I think it was probably about 2001, 2002. The Piston Ted Dixon, Dan Casual Sexton, the Dixon Sexton connection. How these guys didn't make it on a national television, I'll never know. I was a big fan of those guys, but yeah, can't say we're the same people. I'll never admit to that in public. Same with Austin Starr. I mean, that guy didn't have a tattoo.
True. Hey, I did, like I said, did some Wikipedia. I saw you were trained by Eddie Sharkey and Terry Fox.
Yep.
Is that correct?
Yep. You got it.
And you made your debut.
Hey, look,
November
there's some
11th.
things on Wikipedia that are true. Wow, what do you know?
November
It's pretty
11th.
crazy when you can't go edit your own Wikipedia with factual information, and then you get overridden by, somebody else who never met you before. That's my experience with Wikipedia. So, yeah.
But it does say November 11th, 2000, you had your first match against the Sheriff.
Sheriff Johnny Emerald. Yep.
Nice.
Yep. I think I knocked him pretty loopy about 3 minutes in on a front flip leg drop that maybe didn't hit quite right. And just picked him up and just kept motoring through the match. we got to the end, so it was success.
Dude, you're coming up on 25 years in the pro wrestling business.
Yeah.
An incredible career. You've done it all. You truly have. And it all, for me, started when I started watching you in 2004 with Ring of Honor. I was like hearing about the Samoa Joe CM Punk thing, and I'm like, wow, what is this? And who's going to beat Samoa Joe? And Sure enough, it was this up-and-comer from Generation Next named Austin Aries. Can you take us through beating Samoa Joe for the ROH World title?
Well, obviously, that was the thing that kind of put me on the map, in a more visible spotlight. Really all because of what Joe had done with that title, with that, epic reign he had. And I didn't know it at the time, but some years later, was talking with Gabe Sapolsky, who was the booker. And I was down in Florida wrestling for FIP, which was like Ring of Honor's, sister promotion down here. And so we got stuck down here in the airport because of hurricanes. And that ended up actually allowing Gabe and myself to have a whole day to just really talk and get to know each other. And he told me years later that it was after that conversation and being stuck in the airport where he thought that I could be the guy that could supplant, Joe's reign. So, you never think of it at the time, but the hurricane in some weird way, worked in my favor. Listen, for me, it was important. And, I'm still in this weird old school mentality where I hate breaking kayfabe and talking about the inner workings. It's taken me some time to accept that, that's the world we live in, and everyone wants to talk like they all know how to pull the magic tricks, whether they do or not. So I remember right after I won the title, I had an interview with one of the dirt sheet writers, and I felt like they wanted to pose the question in a way that was breaking kayfabe. And they said, "What did it feel like when Gabe Sapolsky told you you were going to beat Samoa Joe?" And I got upset and offended because I felt like you were deliberately trying to frame the question in a way that was inside or behind the scenes breaking kayfabe. And my philosophy is, if you're not someone who's actually paid the dues to put your boots on and be in the ring, then you haven't earned the right to have that kind of conversation. So I always say, like, just to even be in the ring with a guy like Samoa Joe at that point in a title match, that in and of itself says the company believes enough in you that if you were to win and become the champion, that they feel like you could carry that position. Once I found out I was going to be wrestling Joe at Final Battle, I reached out to him because we didn't know each other that well. I was still pretty new in the company. I reached out to him and said, "Hey, man, if you're cool with it, I'd like to fly out to LA for a couple of weeks so we can get to know each other, so that you feel good about what's about to transpire," because that was important to me. I really believed in this stuff, right? So that was really that was what I really remember the most. I went out there, trained with a couple of buddies of mine who had some martial arts background, and then hung out with Joe and got to know him a little bit, so that again, not that he's such a professional, not that he would have said, "No, I'm not going to pass the torch to this guy," but it was important for me that he respected me and got to know me, so that he felt good about that. And so, yeah, I can look back at that match now and see how green I was and how I was just trying to follow along the best I could and do my part. But it's one of those things where the way I saw it play out in my mind, the story that was being told translated to where, for the first 90% of that match, it felt like just another Samoa Joe title defense where he's going to eat this kid's lunch. Yeah. And then all of a sudden, because I knew, like, I wasn't the kind of guy where there was one thing I could hit on him to beat him. It was going to have to be this moment of, like, shock and awe. Like, the opportunity presented itself. I was going to have to hit him with this combination of 2, 3, 4 things in a row to maybe have a chance to beat him, because he was that dominant. And you could feel that in the crowd when that moment hit, and they started to realize, like, oh wait, this guy might. And then by the time I start climbing the ropes, after hitting the brain buster, the people could feel like, oh, this might actually happen. And when it did, it's probably, again, testament to Joe and what he did, but one of the more memorable title switches, that we've had probably in the last 25 years.
Such a shocking moment. I remember I was like, 16. I don't want to age it, but I was 16 and I read the new WrestleZone or whatever. I was like, oh my gosh, Austin Aries. Like, everyone was like, oh, CM Punk's probably going to beat him. It was like so shocking.
Sure.
As just as a fan. And those were in the VHS tape days, so we didn't get to watch the match if we weren't there till a month later. But yeah, it was great, man. You had a great title reign there. But fast forward, and I know that we have. I mean, we could do like 25 episodes on your career at least. And I just wanted to say, I wanted to ask you how that compared to winning the TNA World title several years later from Bobby Roode.
Right. Honestly, it was just much different circumstances, and I was at a much different point in my career. The Ring of Honor title win was kind of it was a moment where it was like, okay, I'm doing something right, to be put in that position. I think that the TNA World title win was a bit of a validation for me personally, because that's a company that I had left previously, not under the best of circumstances, because we had a difference of opinion of my value to that company and where where I felt I could, where I could be. And I felt like I was always kind of being pigeonholed as a undercard X division guy, but never really taken seriously as a guy that could be in the main event. And so, you know, I left there a couple times over differences of how we do business and how we treat people, you know, which somehow got painted into me being hard to work with. Well, you know, newsflash for anybody who doesn't know, the wrestling industry is really hard to work with. You know, promoters who are used to chewing guys up and spitting them out are kind of hard to work with. And you know, I was raised to, you know, right is right, you know, and so to come back after those experiences and then not because anybody had it earmarked for me, but because of my own work and my own connection with the crowd, they couldn't deny it and they had to pull the trigger. There was a I'm more proud of that title win than the Ring of Honor one, you know, because
Wow.
I was told, you know, many times what they thought of me, and then I came back and on my own merits I proved them wrong.
Yeah, you did. I mean, the Austin Starr character. I mean, they brought you in as, you know, with Roderick Strong, and like they really didn't seem like they had plans for you, and you went on and you freaking were the main guy for years,
Yeah.
and then you came back again and were the main guy. But before that, Danny, did you have anything to add with the Ring of Honor, the TNA? I want to get to the WWE stuff, and then I want to
Yeah,
get to the core of this podcast, where
for
we're going to
sure.
talk about training pro wrestlers and your methods and
Yeah.
thoughts on that, and health and fitness.
Yeah.
But Danny, did you have anything to add here?
Well, it always blows my mind when, you know, you hear people talk about, I was just a little guy and stuff. Like when you pick up like Bully Ray or Samoa Joe and do the Brainbuster, it's incredible because they classify you as such a small guy, but then you're doing these things that like small guys don't do these type of things. And it always blows my mind that people are so, uh, they can't overlook just a smaller stature as being a big like a main event type person. It always blows my mind. So I was always impressed when I see you do stuff like that. But then I hear people be like, oh, he's a small guy. I'm like, yeah, but I mean, it's incredible looking at these things that you know you can accomplish by doing that. It's incredible.
Well, you know, the weird thing with wrestling is we've had these like weight divisions, right? But we don't always adhere to them. So, you know, AJ Styles was never a heavyweight. You know, he was, you know, maybe 10 pounds bigger than me. Daniel Bryan's never been, you know, a heavyweight. Um, but then if you look at other combat sports, more often than not, the guys on the top of the card that are the real draws have very rarely been heavyweights. I mean, really, since Tyson, who's been the guy that's really been a heavyweight that's been the draw? It's been your, you know, it's been your McGregor's. It's been your, you know, I mean, Manny Pacquiao's. I mean, you can go right down, you know. So in those sports, we don't dock guys because they're not the heavyweight. People are tuning in to see Floyd Mayweather. He's never been a heavyweight. So in these sports, it doesn't matter how big you are. It matters how entertaining you are and how good you are. But I think with pro wrestling, predominantly because there was one guy who kind of dictated what the perception of pro wrestling was, and he liked larger than life, physically larger than life characters. And because of that, anyone who didn't stack up to that was automatically put down here. And so, you know, if you take a look at, you know, Ring of Honor, you know, outside of Samoa Joe and a few guys, most of us would have been classified as junior heavyweights. You know, if you look at TNA, the X division was all guys that were junior heavyweights, but that was a lot of times like the most exciting parts of the show. So it's only this weird thing in wrestling where we have weight things, but you know, weight classes, but we don't really adhere to them. And then automatically, if you're not the heavyweight guy, you're automatically assumed to be lower on the card, even if you're more entertaining, even if you're more skilled. And I think the beauty of pro wrestling is that in this art form, my job is to make it believable that I can beat a guy that outweighs me by 75 pounds. And I found a way to do that by my offensive skill, by my psychology of how I would attack this fight. You know, and this was something that I you know, had to deal with in WWE, where they wanted me to wrestle like a small guy. And I've never wrestled like a small guy. And I had to argue with them once because I was wrestling a guy who was 6'7", and they were telling me how I should wrestle this guy. And I had to ask these producers that were probably about 6'6" to 6'8" themselves, how many fights have they been in with a guy that's a foot taller than them? Because if you've never
Yeah.
been in a fight with a guy a foot taller than you, I don't know how you're going to give me the strategy what works for me. What works for you at 6'8", fighting a guy who's your size is different for me at 5'8". I can't use that same strategy because that's a losing strategy. And these are some of the discussions or arguments, I use that term in quotes. It wasn't like it was a actual argument, but a disagreement that we had there. It's like, well, I'm having 6'6" guys telling me, a 5'8" guy, how to wrestle a guy that's a foot taller than me when you've never done that once in your life.
Yeah, I hate to bring the name up because of the stigma, but I mean, Chris Benoit, like I see a lot of the way Chris Benoit moved in the ring, bumped, sold, did everything that Chris Benoit did in the ring was believable. And he was like 5'9" or whatever he was. And I saw the same in you. Like, you're just a machine in the freaking ring. And so I think that, and you look like you can whoop someone's butt, if I could say that. And so it's like, yeah, you don't have to be 7 foot tall. If you look like you can whoop someone's butt and move around like you can, I mean, shoot, I've been rocked by small guys and they're quick, man. Like they'll rock you. So I mean,
Well,
I
a guy
totally
again,
understand.
a guy like Eddie Guerrero, right? A guy that was probably 5'7", like legit, but you never felt like he was in there wrestling small.
Yeah,
And I
absolutely.
think it's also something you alluded to. It's a presence. And there's guys that I see now that are 6'2" that I don't believe they could whoop anyone's butt because there's a presence that they're missing, right?
Yeah.
To say, okay, he's athletic, but if I spit in his wife's face at the bar, is this guy going to fight me? Can he fight? And one thing whether I'm tough or not, isn't even part of the debate. But there was a switch I could flip to where you went, he's not the biggest, but I'm not sure I'd want it with him.
Yeah.
Right.
There's a look in his eye and there's a way he's carried himself where that guy, he looks like mean, and he's a guy that maybe I just won't want to mess with because I'm not sure. I think I should be able to kick his butt, but there's a presence there now. There's a look in his eye where maybe it's not even worth figuring that out. And I think that's something that a lot of guys maybe don't have, that stature wise they have, but they never feel like a real threat because they don't have that presence to them, and I think that's something that served me in the ring is be able to flip that switch to where you might kick my butt, but I'm gonna make you earn it.
Absolutely, man. Danny's he's a big guy. He's like 6'5". I'm 6 foot, not a super big guy. Danny knows how to lock up. He was in the military. He was in the Marines.
Sure.
But I've been in the wrestling ring since I was 18. And when I was 12 years old and I started watching, because of The Rock and Kurt Angle and guys like that, I was like, man, how amazing would it be to be at WrestleMania, like to wrestle like in the WWE, like such a dream. I'm never gonna be big enough. I'm 6 foot. I'm not big enough, and Brock Lesnar's coming on. I'm like, man, Brock Lesnar's a monster. And like I said, I saw Ring of Honor, and I was like, well, wait a second, TNA. I was like, wait a second. I think I could wrestle Samoa Joe. I could see myself doing that. And then I found independent wrestling in my local scene, and the rest is what it is. But WrestleMania. All right.
Yep.
You've been to the WWE, you've wrestled, and I know it was a kickoff show. I don't care. It was 80,000 people, whatever, for the Cruiserweight Championship. I mean, did you always want to be in the WWE? And then can you take us through that moment of stepping on that WrestleMania stage in that fur coat for
Yeah.
WrestleMania?
To answer your first question, not really. I started watching wrestling in 1982. And the first stuff I saw was the AWA, being from the Midwest, and then became a big follower of the NWA, the Crockett years, 505 on TBS. And really what I think is the golden era of what I consider professional wrestling, not sports entertainment. The Horsemen, Ole,
Yep.
Iron, Tully, Rick with JJ Dillon. Dusty Rhodes, Rock and Roll Express, Midnight Express, the Russians, the Road Warriors. That'll always be wrestling to me. And I watched WWF at the time, but it was kind of cartoony and over the top. And it was like, well, that's the fake stuff. I like watching the real stuff. And so that's what I was gravitated towards. When I got in the business, my goal, honestly, was just when somebody asks me what I do for a living, I don't want to say I wait tables. I want to say I'm a professional wrestler. And if that meant going to Japan or Mexico, or I didn't know what that looked like exactly, but that was my goal. It was never to go to WWE. Now, once you get in the business and you start checking off accomplishments and you start understanding the business side of what we do, then obviously that's the place where you have the most upside financially to really make the most money and really cement a legacy, you know?
Yeah.
And so after I kind of accomplished everything and more than I really set out to do, you know, when that opportunity presented itself, you know, you can't not take it because it was like the last hurdle I hadn't cleared. You know, and for a lot of people, if you don't have those 3 letters on your resume, you never really made it. I remember Virgil telling me that, you know, well, of all people, right? So yeah, and so when you know you realize how many great talents have put decades into their career that never get the opportunity to step out on a WrestleMania stage, and so there was a immense gratitude and also some pride that everything I'd put into my career, that I was there actually in spite of myself in a lot of ways, right? I didn't have people in the back that were pulling for me or pushing me or talking me up in creative meetings. I literally got that position with my mouth. And and this is like one of the stories I tell when I do seminars or I do, you know, these type of podcasts you don't always understand why things happen to you, but sometimes if you just trust the process, down the road it will be revealed. And sometimes in the moment what feels like the worst thing that could happen ends up being the best thing that could happen. And so for me, I didn't really come in there. I kind of came to the company under like, you know, double secret probation because of my perceived attitude problems. And I'm not maybe very corporate friendly because I ask why instead of saying yes. Um, but so I wasn't really doing anything of note. They didn't really seem to have a direction for me other than being a veteran guy to help the NXT brand. And on a house show out in, I think it was Bakersfield, I just caught a kick from Shinsuke Nakamura and it shattered my orbital bone.
Mm.
And so in the moment you're thinking, well, that's pretty terrible, you know? And so I go and I get the surgery and I have a plate in my face. And I remember mentioning to Triple H, hey man, like if there's some other role I can fill while I'm on the shelf, I don't want to sit home for 3 or 4 months. So if there's something else I can do, you know, just keep me in mind. So I got home the day after surgery and I'm starting to think of my comeback and maybe I'll come back with a contact in my eye or I'll do something. And the phone rings. And they said, hey, we're starting this 205 Live program with cruiserweights and we want you to do color commentary on it. I said, oh, great. Like, well, when? They're like, you fly out tomorrow. So here I thought I was, you know, had a few months to recalibrate and I was right on the road. And so going into that first night, I said to myself, this might be the most important opportunity of your career because I knew that Vince McMahon had no idea who I was. He probably never heard of me. He's not watching the Indies. He doesn't watch Ring of Honor or TNA. He doesn't know who I am. But I also knew that there was guys in that company that maybe didn't look like Vince type of guys, like your Kevin Owens or your CM Punks, that once they got on the microphone and he realized that they could talk, it changed his opinion of them. Oh, maybe I can do something with these guys. And so that first night on commentary, I was really commentating to an audience of one. And that was Vince. If I can get over with the old man, maybe I've got a shot to do something here because I don't really have anybody else in my corner. But if he likes me, it doesn't really matter. And so I got through that commentary. And I remember the line that I thought remember I dropped the line and I heard him laugh in my ear, and I went, okay, I might be okay here. And it was the first match, and it was the Bollywood Boys.
Mm-hmm.
And one of the announcers said, oh, yeah, I talked to the Bollywood Boys today. They're so excited to finally be in the WWE. And I said, oh, yeah, well, I talked to them before you did. They told me they were just happy to be in a country with running water and indoor plumbing. And I just heard, ha, 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 in my earpiece. Because you got to know your audience, you know?
Yep.
And so the show wraps up, and I walk around to the back, and there's Vince standing outside Gorilla with his hands in his pocket, looking like a proud papa. And I'll always remember this. God damn it. That's the best debut anybody's had in commentary in the history of this company.
Wow.
And I was just like, that's what I said. I was like, wow. I was like, well, Vince, thank you so much. Like, good shit. I was like, well, it's all downhill from here. And he popped, and I walked in, and I was like, and then not even a week later, I was told that he wanted to do Neville versus me at WrestleMania. Because previously, I think they were going to do a multi-man scramble match. And I think some of the other talent was told that on the DL. Don't say anything, but we're hearing this. And then when it got switched, and it was me and Neville, those guys that had been told that kind of got some boo-boo faces and somehow thought that I had something to do with it, like I politicked for the spot or something, which wasn't the case. But yeah, man, that's an example of, you know, the worst thing that could happen to you turns out to be the best thing that happened to me, because without me being on commentary, I don't know that I ever walk out for any WrestleMania, you know? And so that was really it. And again, that was that moment of like, I created that. Like nobody gave that to me. Like I created that myself in spite of myself. Right.
Absolutely, man. And that WrestleMania 33 Orlando, take us through that, man. Because, you know, most of the people watching this or listening to this, we've never wrestled at WrestleMania. Like, we've never stepped on as that had to be like, okay, 20 years or 17 years at the time you've been in the business, and you're like, you damn right I'm at WrestleMania for the title. You know, I'm for Austin freaking Aries. Like, what was your mindset? What did that feel like?
That was not my mindset. You know what, to be quite honest, and you know, when you get up there, especially, you know, because I was still new to the system, I'd only been there 18 months. And everything was changing, right? I was going from, you know, NXT, which had its schedule, and then all of a sudden I'm on the road doing commentary, and I'm on the road, you know, and so like it was difficult adjusting to the speed of that schedule and just the workload of that schedule, because it was unlike anything I had done before. You know, with TNA, we would tape a couple episodes over a weekend and then maybe have the next, you know, 3-4 weeks off. You know, Ring of Honor was running once, maybe twice a month, but then I would have these blocks in between shows to eat and train and do all my things. And now with WWE, it was the opposite. I was on the road 5.5 days a week, and I'd have a day and a half at home before I was back on the road. And so I was just trying to get accustomed to the scheduling. And then the thing with WrestleMania, man, like there's so much to the lead up. Like you would like to just be able to sit back and kind of bask in the, you know, but you don't have time. It's like, man, I got it. You know, the Hall of Fame, I got to get suits. I got to get a couple of different suits. So I got, you know, suits for the weekend, and, oh, I got to get some new ring gear. You know, trying to get your gear done. And, oh, your family and friends want to be there. So you're trying to coordinate their travel and their hotels and all these things, you know, and then the match itself, you know, you're trying to put that together, and where are you on the card, and what are they going to let you do, and what can you not do? And so there are these factors in, and then you're trying to stay in the gym and make sure you look good and eat right. And so honestly, by the time I walked out of the curtain and saw these 70,000 people, it was almost like this, like, sigh of relief, like, oh, finally, you know, like, because the wrestling's the easiest part. That's the easiest part, man. It really is. When you've been doing it, like the actual match itself was the least stressful, easiest part of it. It was everything leading up to it that was just like, can we just get this over with already? I mean, and it's, you know, might sound kind of shitty to say that, but you know, that was at least my reality with everything that was going on. You know, it was like personal life, professional life, family thing, here, this, your first time experiencing this, it's all coming at you fast, and you're just trying to juggle it all the best you can, and then go out there and put on a good performance. So yeah, I allowed myself, when I stepped out, I allowed myself that moment to really be present and appreciate and like let that moment hit me of like, holy shit, there's 70,000 people out here. Like this is insane.
Yeah.
And then it was just like, whether it could have been 70 people out there, because once you've done this long enough and you're confident in your abilities, and obviously I had a great opponent that night who was a high level, you know, and Pac Neville. But once you get in that ring, man, it block it all out, and now you're just gonna go and you're gonna perform like you do. So yeah, it was a great moment of validation and gratitude, but also like relief, like, okay, good. Like we're finally here to the wrestling part, which is the part that I enjoy the most and is the least stressful for me at the end of the day.
Absolutely, man. I thought you won the cruiserweight championship. I had to double check myself today. I was like, wow, you never did. It's really unfortunate. Do you know why you didn't win the cruiserweight title?
I mean, I don't know. I can speculate what I think, and you know, everything's very fickle there. And for as fast as someone like Vince likes you, the tides can shift pretty quick. And I don't know if it was. I have no. It was never brought to me if there was a reason. Um, you know, there were some contract things that we were discussing behind the scenes that might have played into it. You know, I think one of the most frustrating things in my career is that we don't just shoot people straight, and we don't just level with people, and we don't just pull them in a room man to man and say, hey man, here's what's going on. You know, it's a lot of this secret heat and kayfabe shit, which I never understood. um but yeah, like it wasn't lost on me that as a babyface, when you have a babyface challenge for a title 3 times and lose 3 times in a row, that does not bode well for your future. You know, unless that's a mechanism to turn him into a bad guy, which is where I always felt I had the most value, right? You know, my value is in being an antagonist, because I enjoy the part where I get to then give it to the hero. And that's the part a lot of the bad guys don't like. They like the front half where they get to be a jerk and be tough and strong and tell everybody, F you or whatever. But when it's time to get it turned around and then have it shoved up their butt and, get what they have to deserve, coming to them, that's when it's like, whoa, brother, I gotta be strong. I gotta keep my heat. And it's like that. My favorite part was once I knew I got under your skin and once I knew you really hated me. Well, now think of how much more you're going to enjoy it when this guy beats me, and that was my satisfaction. And so, my only really real regret there is that the fans of the WWE universe never really got to see me do what I do best. They got to see a WWE kind of watered down version of me, stripping me of a lot of my offensive moves that I had done previously, stripping me of the character and the personality that got me there. And so I was just, trying to do what they asked me to do in their parameters, but I was never really unleashed there and, to really be the best version of me.
Well, I wouldn't be surprised if you ended up back in WWE or wherever you want to go.
I would be. I'd be damn shocked. Let me see if there's some pigs flying outside real quick. I'm just
gonna. Am I getting punked right now? Is that what's going on?
Yeah, right.
Well, I mean, like you said, man, you they didn't get very much of you. They didn't get to see the Austin Aries that most fans know through your Ring of Honor, your TNA work, your independent work, your
but they don't need
Full Impact Pro. By the way, I was watching that. Didn't they run those at a strip clubs or something back in the day?
Killer Cross said something recently in an interview that really kind of hit the nail on the head, and he articulated it in a way that I thought made a lot of sense. Like in the WWE, as this big corporate entity, they need painters. They don't need artists, right? They say, "Hey, go paint the room green." Okay. Now, I like to think of myself as more of an artist. Like, can I paint the room green? I mean, sure. But I could paint you something much more compelling. But in that environment, like, you don't need an artist to paint the room green. You need a painter. And so sometimes if you come in there and be like, well, I'm an artist, so like, we don't need an artist. We just need a painter. We said green, paint it green. And you're like, okay, well, you know what? I got this shade of green. Just paint it green. And it's that simple. Yeah. Right. And so the things that I think that helped me in my career aren't maybe necessarily valued there to that level. And especially if it comes with, perceived, attitude problems or these things where, and a lot of times it's just as an artist, that system moves so fast. Like they're more concerned about the quantity of content, not the quality of content. And for me to be sitting there and hemming and hawing over the picture, or if the room was perfectly painted green, and they're just like, man, we need this room painted now blue, and you're still sitting there worrying if you did the right job in the green one. And so that's not bashing anyone. That's just the way the system is. It moves so fast that the writers can't sit there and worry about if this was said the exact perfect way to get across the point we tried. Because guess what? We have another one tomorrow. And then we have another one the day after that. And then next week we have another one. So it moves so fast. We can't sit here and wait for your artistic mind to sign off and go, okay, that's perfect. Right? It doesn't work that way. So, I don't know that I ever want to go and be a painter, So I don't know that I would ever want to go back there.
Well, things are always changing too, with the TKO thing, WrestleMania going to Saudi Arabia.
Yeah.
You just never know what's going to happen there. Before we move on from WWE, Danny, did you have any questions for Austin Aries about WWE?
I absolutely agree. Like some of my favorite things about you were, in TNA when you where you wore the trunks that had all the headlines talking about you on it, the newspaper ones, and you had all the belts. Like that was my favorite version of you, because you would just go out there, you would just basically just tear people apart as you're laying across the ring ropes, and then and that's the issue. That's the thing that I think that a lot of WWE fans never got to see, which in my opinion was some of the greatest stuff I've ever seen. Ring work like that, it was pretty incredible. But I wouldn't mind seeing, if you went back, there's quite a few people I'd like to see some dream matches with. But, like you said,
listen, it was to get there at 38 was quite an accomplishment, especially at 5'8" to get there at 38. Man, I don't think at 47 or 40, 48.
Yeah, true.
But listen, in all honesty, if they had any idea to bring me back, it would be as a coach or a producer, not as an active wrestler. And that's fine. And for me, I just don't know lifestyle wise if that's something I'd want to take on my plate, knowing the atmosphere there, knowing the scheduling. And listen, they certainly didn't need me. They're doing just fine. And that's the reality of it. Like when you create a system where you can plug and play guys in, that's a good business model, because now no one guy can hold you hostage. No one guy is bigger than the brand. I think this is something they learned with your Rocks or your Stone Colds or your Hulk Hogan's, is we can never have a guy that's bigger than the brand itself. The brand always has to be the biggest thing. And then our top guys are all guys that we can just pluck that guy out and plug that guy in, and the machine keeps moving, doesn't miss a beat. That's good for negotiations, right? Because it keeps the power in the company when it comes to negotiations, as opposed to giving the power to the talent.
Yeah. And I'm so glad you brought up being a coach, because I know you were the head trainer at the Ring of Honor school, and Danny here and we've started this Chainbreaker Pro Wrestling recently, and we have what's called sports entertainment going on here in Chico, California, the home of Brian Cage, and myself, and AJ Kirsch, and a couple other people, Aaron Rodgers. But here in Chico, California, we're doing sports entertainment, sir, and I would absolutely love, to hear your philosophy on training aspiring pro wrestlers, the do's and don'ts, and your methods, your style. Let's talk about it.
I look back at my training and what it was and what it emphasized. And that's the blueprint I follow because it worked for me. Meaning I was given a real basic fundamental foundation of the what I think is like the real like core foundation of this art form. And then once you have that foundation, as you go and you ply your trade and you go and you put your work in, you put your time in, you're able to build a nice house, you know, and you'll build it as you go. And so that worked for me. And my style compared to my trainer's style couldn't be any more different. But by them giving me the real old school fundamental basic foundation of what this is, it allowed me to build on top of that. And so what I've just seen in you know the last decade and a half is most places aren't taking the time to build that foundation. I think part of that is because when you do pay for play and you're collecting your 30 or 50 bucks every week from everybody, then you have the pressure to make sure they keep coming back. So you start moving them too fast to teach them what they want to know as opposed to what they need to know. Because those first 6 months of my training weren't fun. They weren't glamorous. I wasn't learning any of the moves on TV I was seeing. It was repetition of the most basic fundamental things until it became muscle memory. So I no longer had to think about it. Because as you keep leveling up in this industry, there's so many things you have to be processing and thinking about in the course of a match that you can't be thinking about 101 stuff. Feeding the right way, footwork, right? Like just how to counter this, how to move into that. These aren't things, how to hit the ropes. What are my steps when I hit the turnbuckle? These aren't things you can be thinking about because now you're thinking about time cues. Where's the hard camera? Where, and so what I see is the guys and the girls are just getting moved too fast before these basic fundamentals are muscle memory to where you no longer think about it. And we're moving them into spots, and where this wrestling is going, it's very spot heavy now, right? I say we're kind of in this era of like button mashing pro wrestling, where I'm watching a video game of two guys mashing buttons, and there's very little facial expressions because everyone's thinking about the next spot, right?
Yep.
So that's just when I train guys, first of all, I got half your money up front. So I got, if it's, $3,000, you got to come with half of that. We can work out a payment plan for the other half, but I need an investment. I'm not going to sell my tricks a la carte like some magician. Oh, you want to learn the rabbit out of the hat? That's $40. That is, and then I teach you 2 tricks and now you go tell everyone you're a magician. That's bullshit. So I want that commitment financially. Because now the first 4 weeks, as soon as the first day of class, I tell everyone, nobody gets in that ring for the first month. And then you see a bunch, well, because you need to earn the right to get in the wrestling ring. You don't just pay your way in. And there's a process here of things that we need to learn that you need to have down before we get in the ring, because I don't want to go back and review these things when we're in the ring now, because once we get in the ring, we want to start working on bumps and we want to start working on hitting the ropes and turnbuckles. And then we're going to integrate the things that we just learned the last month, the good lockup, the good hold and counter hold, the psychology of why we do things and when we do things, so that now when we get in the ring, we can take what we've learned here and we can start building upon it with the bumps. Because really, at the end of the day, there's only 4 basic bumps that you need to know, and once you know those, every move comes off of that bump. So if you've perfected the bump and understand how we do these things in the footwork, every move is gonna spawn off of that. But in that process, also that first 4 weeks is I would weed out some of these people who didn't have the right mentality, who just wanted to get in there and do a pile driver or hurricanrana, that didn't have the right aptitude. Right. And I don't care if you don't want to come back on Monday because I already got half your money. And so if you don't want to come back on Monday.
Yeah.
Right. And so that's the way it's like we have to do this the right way. You can't You can't be talking about your skylights of your new house before you've poured the foundation and put the walls up. I don't even want to talk about the skylight. I don't want to talk about the carpeting. I don't want to talk about what color you're going to paint the walls. We haven't even got the foundation laid yet. We're putting the cart before the horse, and we're focused on all the wrong things. And you can get by with that to a certain point if you're wrestling the same 6 guys in your area that you train with every day, so you know all your stuff, and then you spend 45 minutes talking out your 6-minute match. Yeah, okay, yeah, that'll work. Now, go fly across the country, go wrestle a guy you've never met before that doesn't speak the same language as you, and then go do that. And if you don't know the dance steps, because again, this is the tango. Okay, if you know how to tango, and I know how to tango, we don't have to talk about it, and we don't got to practice it. We can get on the dance floor, and we can dance together. But if you don't have the most basic fundamental footwork of the tango, then we can't dance together, right? And so guys aren't learning, in my opinion, the most basic fundamental footwork and psychology of what we're doing, but they're moving too fast into spots and moves. Anyone can emulate a move. It's a bunch of cosplay pro wrestling these days.
Mm-hmm.
You know, put on the costume and emulate what you see on TV. We're just cosplaying as pro wrestlers. And then the other point I want to hit on that I think is why the industry is changed and not for the better. I'm not a shooter by any stretch. However, in my training, every hold I was taught to shoot, and here's how we work it in pro wrestling. Here's a real arm bar. Here's a wrestling arm bar. Here's a hammerlock, and if you do this, you can tear the guy's shoulder out of his socket if you want, but here's how we work it in pro wrestling. Right? A front face lock, if you apply it correctly with your knuckles in the right place, is very uncomfortable. Right? So, and the reason that they taught that back in the day was to protect the business. If you couldn't handle yourself in the ring and you got exposed by one of the guys they called out of the crowd, right, back in the carnivals, when this originally started becoming a work, you had to be able to protect the business and stretch these guys. And so it's obvious now how many guys on TV have never been in real combat, whether it's amateur wrestling, any type of martial arts, jiu-jitsu, a bar fight, anything. You can tell it in their footwork, the way they carry themselves, right? And all it tells everyone, it's like the magician, who we all know that he's not sawing the lady in half, but he's reminding you constantly throughout the show that his magic is complete bullshit. It's not real. And so that's, you know, when I do these seminars a lot, I'll ask these guys by a show of hands, how many people here have done real type of competition, real combat? And, you know, maybe I'll get 25% on a good day.
Wow.
So what I encourage these guys to do is say, well, hey, listen, when you're for your warm-ups, before you start getting into pro wrestling, just catch as catch can. Just go roll around and actually try to catch each other, like wrestle. So that you know, like, what a collar and elbow actually is simulating. So you understand, like, what a real shooting a double leg on a guy would feel like. You know, and so that how can you be a good actor of combat sports if you've never actually experienced any combat sports?
Preach. Hey, one thing I ask people is, what are your goals? Because a lot of people have different goals. Like,
Sure.
people want to go to WWE, people want to go to AEW, people just want to wrestle on an independent show.
On the weekends, it's like they're beer league softball. Yeah.
Yeah. And that's the thing I think people need to be clear about is, you know, if you have goals, like, you know, if someone wanted to wrestle in WWE or AEW, what would you recommend? You'd recommend they would go to a school with somebody that's been to WWE, right? Or what
Well,
would
actually,
you recommend?
I'd recommend that they get a gym membership and they actually look like somebody who would get hired by WWE. AEW is a little different bar there. But that's something I remember that Jim Ross said at a seminar that I was, you know, that he was putting on that I was listening to. If you want to go to WWE, then go stand in front of the mirror and be honest with yourself and look at the people on television, look at yourself and say, do I look like I belong there? And if the answer is no, you know where to start. And you don't need a wrestling ring for that. You don't need a wrestling school. That's the work that you put in by yourself, right? And again, I was never the biggest guy, but when I broke in, I was 150 pounds. I put a lot of work in to get up to 180, 185, to at least look like I could hang with a guy like Samoa Joe,
Yeah.
right? And so for everyone, that's going to look different, but, you know, we're supposed to be athletes. Like this is supposed to be like the combat, you know, athletic competition, you know? And so if you're not maximizing whatever that is for you, your athleticism, you're not maximizing that. You're not acting like an athlete. You're not, you know, training like an athlete. Well, then to me, like you're not really respecting the business and the industry.
Yep. You got to look like you can kick someone's butt.
Well, and then the other part of this is even more important is you need to physically be strong enough to protect your opponent. This guy's giving his body to you and trusting that you're going to do the right thing with it. And if you aren't strong enough to protect a guy when you pick him up, this is when bad things can happen.